Hello, so I'm joined today with Chris Mitchell, who's the Vice President of Government and Industrial Relations at IPC. Great to see you again, Chris.
Great to see you again, Trevor.
Yeah. So you've been a strong advocate of US government-funded initiatives for lead-free, specifically in military and aerospace applications. Why are you getting involved in that, and what's driving that new research?
So IPC has been, of course, involved in this issue for many years. In fact, we lead the PERM Council, which is the collection of companies really interested in trying to address this lead-free issue. Here's what we know. We know that North America is, at least relative to other regions around the world, disproportionately reliant on lead-based electronics and lead-based solder. Yeah. We know that the trend is moving in the opposite direction, which is creating supply chain issues for DoD. It's increasing their costs, and it's making it more difficult for government agencies in particular to really stay current with the most cutting-edge technologies. Yeah. And so in order for government and other industries that rely on advanced electronics, we need to make sure that we address this issue once and for all. It's something that probably should have been done many years ago. But again, I think that there is probably for North America in particular, if you look at the lead solder usage, yeah. It's a particular issue here in the United States, and one that they need to address. In terms of the work that we're doing, I think we're in the midst of, on the cusp of gaining U.S. government dollars for the third straight years for research. We're going to be pursuing 2 more years of funding, and our hope is that out of that research will come a lot greater clarity about what kind of applications can move to a lead-free environment. Right.
Well, I mean, when lead-free first came on the scene, I mean, the military didn't adopt it because of reliability issues in harsh environments. But I mean, I think the work that has been done on lead-free since then, and the development has really made it quite a reliable process.
Absolutely, and so you've seen huge advancements in the industry. The reality is that those advancements aren't necessarily reflected by government decisions, and so that's what we'd like to change. One other quick thing on this lead-free effort. The money that we have been able to secure for this research is being managed by a new Defense Electronics Consortium within the Defense Department. And this is a consortium that really provides, for the first time in many years, an opportunity for U.S. electronics manufacturers to engage directly with the Defense Department on the issues that are really matter to our industry. Right. And so it's another reason why we're excited about this funding. It's really providing that platform. And we see the lead-free project as the first project among many that are pertinent to the future of electronics manufacturing.
It's interesting. It's interesting. So you've got another area. You've got a PCB R&D report coming out shortly. There's a lot of R&D getting done, but I believe from talking to you earlier, you're maintaining that it's getting done in the factory. Can you maybe elaborate on that and tell us a bit more?
Sure. So as part of our industry intelligence program, we've been trying to ensure that internal stakeholders, the industry, as well as external stakeholders, understand better how our industry operates. And I think if you look at R&D, which is an area that our industry sometimes struggles with, given the fact that we have very thin margins, and that makes it very difficult for companies to invest in R&D, among many other things. Now, I think what you see, and what this report that's been authored by Joe O'Neill, who has been a long-time kind of industry leader, what he highlights is the fact that there is R&D taking place. In fact, R&D is taking place every day on the factory, the floor, but instead of segregated, kind of an isolated project within an R&D department, it's taking place on the factory floor in response to a customer need. Right. And so the R&D is very much intertwined with production. Right. And unfortunately, for many PCB manufacturers, that makes it challenging then in terms of taking advantage of government tax credits for R&D. And so the question or the challenge that Joe is putting out there, both to industry and to government, is how do we think a little bit differently about R&D, and how do we, with this greater appreciation for the way in which it's taking place in our industry, can government and industry work more collaboratively to make sure that the needed investments in R&D are made?
Right. Presumably it has to be defined earlier at the beginning of the manufacturing process so that it's not classified just as troubleshooting. And the lines aren't blurred, as it were.
Well, and again, I don't want to take all the thunder out of Joe's report, and I encourage everybody to take a look at it, but I think he draws a contrast with the semiconductor industry and the way in which the semiconductor industry has been able to systematize and bring into uniformity their production processes that then lends itself to R&D, and that hasn't been the case for the PCB industry, where everything is so highly customized.
Yeah.
And so again, it's another facet of this that certainly merits not only consideration, but consideration in the context of policymaking and industry practices.
Okay. Now, I want to change the subject a little bit. More recently, countries like China and Germany have been encouraging their manufacturing companies to reduce their energy output by 20%. In Germany, it's been mandated. I don't know if the enforcement's particularly strong. In China, they've been a lot stronger about it, and they're even cutting companies off in terms of reducing their manufacturing hours, or even fining them if they don't meet this 20% reduction. Do you see that becoming, as we're trying to get into a greener, more energy-friendly, sustainable environment? Do you see that becoming something that's going to be copied by other countries? And what do you think you can do to help members with this type of legislation?
So it's absolutely going to happen at a governmental level across the globe.
Right.
On the other hand, I think it's also happening within the industry and within our relationship with civil society and with customers. Right? I mean, already you look at ESG, there is a huge pressure on companies, especially public companies, to better identify their use of natural resources, including energy. Yeah. And so I think there's going to be a pressure coming from government, but also from non-governmental interests on companies to bring down their energy usage. One of the ways in which we've been trying to address this issue is both in terms of bringing companies together to talk about their use of energy and natural resources, and we do that primarily through our ESG steering group as well as our environmental committees. But in addition, I think there's huge opportunities for the industry to be better stewards of natural resources through applications like the Factory of the Future. To the degree that we have better data, better transparency, it allows us to make better decisions. Right. And so I think that while there is a role for government, the approach that we have been trying to take at IPC is one of not waiting to react to what government is doing, but how can we be good actors in this process, trying to help improve the welfare of our planet. Right.
Excellent. Okay. Now, in the last couple of years, IPC has become a lot more active in Europe, for example.
Yeah, much.
So what have you been doing to help steer some of the manufacturing policies, for example, in Europe, and contribute to the debate around AI and robots and all this type of stuff?
So in Europe, I think we have seen there much of what we've seen in the United States, which is a very almost singular approach on one or two segments of the electronics industry. And so IPC has proselytized the message to policymakers in Europe that we need to take a more holistic approach to electronics manufacturing, because ultimately this is an ecosystem, and to the degree that some segments are weak, it weakens the entire ecosystem. And so if innovation, if supply chain resiliency, if technology advancements and economic security are important, then we need to figure out a way to bring a much more holistic approach to fostering that kind of innovation. Our chief technologist, Matt Kelly, calls this a silicon to systems approach. And again, that's what we've been advocating before policymakers. Right. And I think we're making significant strides. In fact, Allison James, who leads our Brussels office now is in regular communication with both legislative leaders, but also European Commission officials. And I think they're getting the message, okay, we need to do this better, we need to do this more thoughtfully.
Right.
And as a result, you're seeing IPC not only invited into discussions to better scope out what these initiatives should look like, but I think you're starting to see our language appear more in the kind of pronouncements and decisions and policy actions that the EU is taking. So I think I'm very encouraged, and I think what we see in Europe is something in some ways more positive than what we're seeing elsewhere, including North America, which is a real understanding that the European electronics manufacturing is in one place today, and they want it to be somewhere else tomorrow, both in terms of an economic footprint, but also a technological footprint. And there needs to be a transition process to get there, and that has a lot of ancillary benefits to some of the other goals, including environmental. So again, I think it's a very mature discussion that is being had in Europe, and we're just very enthusiastic to be part of that discussion.
Oh, it's interesting. It's great to see that they've been open about it and you're getting a seat at the table to be able to discuss these things. So do you therefore support the EU circular economy, for things like reworkability of printed circuit boards and these types of things?
Yeah, that's a big question. Do we support this concept of circularity and what is taking place in Europe? I think broadly speaking, not it is a reality. I think also there are many things, many initiatives within that broader bucket of circularity actions that absolutely we're enthusiastic about. I think what we have been trying to do is to figure out how do we shape these initiatives in a way that help the EU achieve the goals they have set, while at the same time reducing the burden upon industry. I think we go into it with a spirit of partnership, an interest in the opportunities, but also an understanding that this is going to bring new challenges, new burdens, new costs to the industry, and we need to figure out, as we move in this direction, how do we do so in a way that makes sense.
Okay.
So,
final question, Chris. One of the big threats that's obviously hanging out there is the situation in Taiwan. We hope it's going to resolve itself, but in the event that it doesn't and that China actually goes into Taiwan, is going to cause a lot of disruption in the industry. Have you had any discussions with members about contingency plans or how you're going to address this issue?
Yeah, to say that we have been having conversations about contingency plans seems to be probably a mischaracterization of the conversations, at least that we've been in. Now, we know that government officials are having these kind of conversations. I think the reality, though, is that any action like the action you just referenced would have a pretty cataclysmic effect on the industry.
Right.
And I don't believe that right now the government leaders have really wrap their arms around how to respond in a situation like that. Now, on the other hand, I think it's fair to say that more than in any other time in the last 20 or 30 years, you're seeing government have a greater appreciation for supply chain resiliency, for the need to be investing in innovation and such. And so from that standpoint, I think we are moving in the right direction. Now, moving in the right direction, it's a longer term process. And I don't think that at this point, the United States or Europe would be prepared for the kinds of supply chain disruptions that would result from that kind of an event.
Yeah. Well, let's hope it doesn't come to pass. But I think we have to be aware of it at least, and see and be prepared for what might happen. But anyway, interesting to talk to you as always. You're always involved in so many different policy activities, etc., on both sides around the world, really. So, Chris, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, wonderful talking to you always. Thank you.
Okay.